Now, when it comes to social history, few people are as well read as our old diary friend, the Yorkshire historian Ian Dewhirst. Over the years, he has led us to the far corners of the moors and the dales to share fascinating insights into the region's past. But this time around, I met up with him in Keighley, where he used to be the reference librarian, to hear about a history project very close to his heart. Hello, Ian.
Hello, pleased to meet you again.
We're not meeting on top of a windswept moor for a change.
No, we're in my hometown of Keighley and we're in the grounds of Cliffe Castle Museum and Art Gallery.
Home turf for you.
Home turf, indeed, yes.
And a very, very interesting building, this, I understand.
Yes, it was built by a gentleman called Henry Isaac Butterfield. He was a member of a big textile mill-owning family, but one of these happy people of the generation that didn't need to concern himself over much with textiles. He was a very cosmopolitan gentleman, waxed moustaches, not a hair out of place, carnation in the buttonhole, tie pin. But he was cosmopolitan, spent a lot of his time in France. He had French friends and connections, spoke French fluently, spent as much of his time elsewhere than here at Cliffe Castle.
But tell me about the castle.
Yes, this took something like 10 years to build. It was on the site of a much more modest house called Cliffe Hall, but as you can see, he built it in style. The house as we see it now is a fraction of what it was, because it had all kinds of turrets and gargoyles and an enormous conservatory. It was described in its heyday as a good specimen of the Elizabethan castellated style of architecture, and variously again as a medieval castle in the Victorian era.
Why did he build the place here?
I think he regarded Keighley as his hometown. In spite of the fact he wasn't often here, he was quite a philanthropist. He gave half the money for the purchase of Victoria Park on the other side of town. That was so as a right-of-way through his estate here would be closed on condition he put up the money for another park. But he was quite to the fore when, when there was a worthy cause.
Butterfield died in 1910, a few days before his 92nd birthday. Nearly 40 years later, Cliffe Castle was bought by another larger-than-life character whose life story reads rather like a well-known fairy tale.
Sir Bracewell Smith, who'd started out as a pupil teacher in Keighley, the son of a labourer in a tannery. Sir Bracewell Smith became Lord Mayor of London, and he bought the house and grounds and gave it back, the castle and grounds, to his native town and its people.
And was it gratefully received?
I'm afraid no. The Keighley Town Council of the early 1950s thought they might be saddled with a white elephant. I think they were quite happy to have the park, but they thought that the house would be a burden, and indeed the house was found to be riddled with dry rot. And Sir Bracewell very generously kept giving them more money in order to combat the dry rot, which is why many of the turrets and an upper story in the conservatory, this is why the house as we see it now has been shorn of some of its more extravagant features. It was to combat the dry rot.
In 1958, after several years of restorative work, Cliffe Castle opened as a museum. Now it's about to enter another chapter in its checkered history.
There's going to be some Keighley galleries going to be opened next year. This is going to tell the history of Keighley through a number of different themes. It's going to be, well, I've got at the moment photographs of about nearly 300 objects for which I have to try to write labels for as many of them as possible. And believe me, there's some fascinating items coming to light, many of them out of storage. For instance, there's this hippopotamus skull. Now, when the museum opened, the general public was asked if there'd anything they would donate as exhibits. And this hippopotamus skull came out of an ordinary tourist house from an apparently ordinary member of the public. What do they want with a hippopotamus skull in the cellar? But there it was. There's some Boer War chocolate. In 1900, Queen Victoria sent a box of chocolate out to every soldier and sailor serving in South Africa. A lot of these regarded these as heirlooms and brought them back home again. There's the ox's head. Now, the ox was eaten in honour of the 1887 Queen Victoria's Jubilee.
Some German memorabilia over there, I understand.
There was a 19-year-old Keighley man, John Edward Brownbridge, went to Germany in 1937-38. He'd won an award for 6 months to study the German language. And while he was there, he collected all his memorabilia. If you got weighed in Germany in 1938, your little weighing card had a picture of a film star on, and he collected the film stars. However, he was heard criticising the German annexation of Austria. And then he wrote a letter, a personal letter, in which he described the Germans as blighters. And this tells us a lot about Germany in the late 1930s. His friend, a German friend, saw the letter and took it to the police, with the result that young Mr. Brownbridge was arrested in the small hours of the morning, handed over to the Gestapo for interrogation, and he was kept in a variety of German prisons for 6 weeks. And the Foreign Office was able to persuade the Germans that blighter could mean a mild term of affection. So Mr. Brownbridge was deported and brought his memorabilia back home with him. Later on he became Mayor of Keighley, which is a nice footnote.
We're standing behind this strange contraption.
Yes.
What is it?
This is the wife-taming cradle. It says number 6 on, but there's only ever one. There was a man called Harry Tapp. Well, his nickname was Harry Tapp. This is his mug here. He was a publican at the Royal Oak Inn in Keighley. And in the 1860s, he founded the Keighley Henpecked Club. All members of the Henpecked Club had to do everything possible to please their wives. They had to be up early in the morning, light the fire. They had to, any money that they saved was for the purpose of the wives to take excursions to Morecambe Bay and so forth. And then if a husband was fulfilling all the conditions and his wife still scolded him, he could apply for the club for the use of the wife-taming cradle.
So it was the wife that went in here?
The wife went in the cradle and she was rocked, and this was supposed to tame her from scolding the husband. It was all in fun. There is no record of any wife ever being put in the cradle.
Sir Bracewell gave the castle to the town. No doubt he'd be extremely pleased now to know that it's being used to house the town's own memorabilia.
He certainly would. Although he'd moved on to London and to higher things, Sir Bracewell, he obviously kept his hometown very, very dear to his heart. And I think the way that this material from his hometown is coming out to be viewed by the people of his hometown in Fatherfield, I'm sure, he would be very, very pleased indeed.
Ian Dewhirst.